Today's episode was so interesting and really thought provoking. And we started out the episode by talking about how thoughts don't only affect our physical body, but our thoughts are physical in and of themselves. And we also talk about just how important it is to lead with the mind when we're starting a healing journey.
Exactly, Melissa. And I particularly appreciated that Nicole speaks to self love, self care, and mindfulness, and how these things translate into physical health and well being as evidenced by changes in neurotransmitters and especially changes in the gut microbiome. I found it fascinating. I think you will too. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Emmy Brown here with my co-host, the one and only Melissa Gentile. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Nicole Reilkoff, certified naturopath and reflexologist dedicated to transforming lives through nutrition, mind-body medicine, and other holistic healing modalities, with a drive inspired by an interest in the relationship between food and emotions. With a clear passion for mind-body medicine, we are excited to have Nicole guide us through an exploration of the science behind how our hormones and neurotransmitters translate into thoughts and feelings, and that mysterious yet undeniable gut instinct. Nicole, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Emmy, for that warm introduction. I'm really excited to be here. So I have lots to talk about, and I'm so thrilled to have this chance to share this with everybody watching and listening today.
We are too. And speaking of, I can already tell that you are really, really excited about the work that you do. So can you give us a little bit of a background on what inspires you to do this work? Why should we care?
Okay. I'm going to jump right into it, and
Please do.
a little bit of a trigger warning. I might talk about some heavier stuff, right? So a little bit about myself. There was some childhood sexual abuse that I faced or am continuing to face. And so I am a survivor of incest that led me down a path of addiction. And I've been clean for over 19 years now. And it's been something where it's not something I ever talk about per se with clients, but I'm opening this up because I want to let people know that there's healing, and there's, no matter where you are at what point in your life, there's always hope. And I think that is the key message that I really want to bring, because it's understanding the principles behind food, behind the water we drink, behind our sleep, behind the tests that we supply to our clients and to anybody else. It's something that we need to look at. The emotional state is so intertwined with our well-being that we cannot preclude it. We cannot ignore it. We cannot say, take this supplement, take this medicine, take this way of life, whatever it is, unless we address every aspect and component of the individual. And that is the holistic body mindset.
Nicole, I can tell you are just so connected to your work, and I'm so excited for all of the topics that we're going to dive into today. I can't wait. I want to jump right into hormones and neurotransmitters and how that relates to emotional health. So can you break down the main hormones and neurotransmitters that are involved in our emotional health and how they affect our emotional health?
All of them. Mm-hmm. So every single hormone, the whole spectrum, all the estrogens, all the androgens, testosterone, progesterone, all of the all of the neurotransmitters. So, and also all the cytokines, and whether it's pro-inflammatory, immune modulating, whatever it might be, they're all connected. Because when we think about emotion, we can ask ourselves, what does that mean? What is an emotion? It is technically the interoception, which is your body's nervous system and endocrine system working together to understand what is happening internally and produces a physical sensation. And that is typically what an emotion is. Same thing with a thought. We think of the thoughts in our brain, but the majority of neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. And so the whole body is involved. So every thought that we have, every feeling that we have, every experience that we experience that internally. It can seem like it might be something happening external to us, but it is an eternal event that we are translating and understanding based on past experiences, based on what we have available to us on a biochemical basis. And that is what creates our essence of who we are.
And do they both affect each other? Because it sounds like it can kind of go both ways, correct?
Absolutely. So in terms of how it intermingles, that's why there isn't a set fingerprint. Like, I'm not going to get somebody's results from doing a urinary hormone and transmitter test and say, oh, you've got too much anger or sadness happening. It's not like that. It's about understanding that everything kind of works together. But when we see those imbalances, it does give an indication that there's stuff that we can do on one level, but we need to address the whole. And we can also understand, I mean, we think about serotonin or dopamine, our happy hormones and neurotransmitters that work together. But we can't keep it as simple as that, because when we're feeling anxious or happy or excited, those neurotransmitters are the same. They're not shifting. It's not just one is on and the other is off. It's about how we interpret those feelings inside of ourselves, that interoception that is constantly taking place, constantly, constantly, constantly.
And speaking of the whole body and so many of these inputs, Nicole, what are some common misconceptions about the role of diet and lifestyle in emotional health that you encounter most often?
Oh, great question. I think a lot of people, it's not about misconceptions per se, it's oftentimes a lack of awareness,
Mm,
because people will be eating something and justifying it to themselves. But in that moment of justification, there's a shift happening. There is something, as I mentioned, every thought that you have. So if you're there justifying an action of eating something or drinking something, already that is affecting you internally. That's affecting your emotional output. It's affecting how you're going to process that food. It's affecting your metabolism of it, how you're going to digest it. It's a whole body experience. So that's why mindfulness is so key. We live in a society today where I don't think any one of us is free from our screens, especially when we're on a break and we're eating our lunch or whatever. The screen is right there. It's that
yeah.
constant distraction. We're not connecting to our food. We're not connecting to ourselves. And that connection is absolutely essential if we want to be able to really profit the most from what we are intaking. And it's crucial. It's crucial to have that mind-body awareness.
Exactly. When you were speaking to that, all I'm thinking in my head is everyone who is scrolling on their phone while they're eating lunch, or they're bringing their lunch to their desk at work and they're working while they're eating, or they're eating in the car. And it's like, wow, we really don't realize like how we're really not even thinking while we're eating. We're just kind of like inhaling our food, thinking about something else, looking at a screen, like you said. So, can you describe maybe another scenario where hormone imbalance or neurotransmitter imbalance or distraction can affect someone's mental state?
Oh, it happens all the time. I have clients who come in and they're talking to me about what's happening in their life. They're talking to me about their gut issues. And then they mention to me, yes, you know what, I've experienced this trauma in terms of traumatic brain injury or a surgery that they had due to walking into the street, not paying attention, or somebody else not paying attention, driving and striking that person, because I don't want to lay blame anywhere. But it's a fact. The fact is that there was a collision. They're now dealing with the consequences of that. They've got the effects of the digestive issues that they're dealing with. But it's one of those things. I mean, we can think of it as that distraction in the moment when we're eating, but it's also the larger areas in life too. We don't always have that situational awareness that we need in order to be in tune to what's happening within ourselves, outside of ourselves, to make healthy predictions. And that's really what our brain is doing constantly. We're not experiencing something and then just reacting to it. Our brain is in a constant state of prediction and weighing out the probabilities of that. And that's really from the work of Elisa Fieldman Barrett, who wrote How Emotions Are Made. And she really goes into depth in terms of helping to understand how our brain makes predictions so constantly. And it's fascinating work.
So that word prediction, and you're kind of diving into how our brain, if I'm hearing this correctly, our brain is constantly trying to predict our next emotional state through kind of everything in our surroundings.
In part, but it's the predictions are taking both the information that we have externally, so what we're seeing, and that data being transmitted through our body, and what we're feeling, and our past experiences. So if something unexpected happens, how long do we have to react to that? So if we're driving, we have that expectation that, hey, some other driver might not be paying attention. We have that alertness. So our brains are already predicting what might happen next so that we're ready to react incredibly quickly, instantaneously almost, to self-preserve, to stay alive, to prevent either that injury that could happen to ourselves or to another. So there's always that awareness. There's always that prediction happening. And it's both the what we're feeling inside. And the way that I look at that is that when we're babies, we're completely especially in utero, we have that space of interoception where we don't have any of the outside stimuli. So it's that ability to start understanding and creating all those sensations and transcribing that into understanding and experience. And then once we're born, then we have all the external stimuli, and that's when that the overwhelming influx of information coming from inside ourselves gets quieted so we can pay attention to the world outside of ourselves.
And what's the takeaway from this, Nicole? As far as when you speak to clients, it sounds like the external stimuli is meeting the internal past experiences, trauma, preconceived notions. How do we reconcile both is what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Absolutely. Meditation. There's a reason why practitioners return to meditation time and time again, because that is the link. That is the key that allows you to be still enough to hear, perhaps hopefully, your heartbeat, to hear your breath, to hear the blood moving through your body, to feel all of these things that are happening internally, or it could be feeling pain, being still enough to truly feel pain and to actually understand it as not being some annoying outside aspect that you have to deal with, but as something internal, a message that if we bring in an understanding of it, we can have grace and gratitude for that sensation, no matter how strong it may be. You think about a woman giving birth. Why can somebody go through that extremity of pain to that immensity of emotion? Because there's that understanding of what's happening. There's that acceptance, there's that hope, there's that love, that authenticity that comes forward in that moment that allows for that to really take place and grow and bloom and create a whole new life.
Yeah, it's beautiful how you describe it. And I imagine having that mindset and being able to tap into that meditative state and have that acceptance also positively impacts our hormones. At least I would hope so. Is that what you see?
Yes, because as I mentioned, every thought that we have, every feeling that we have has a physiological basis. It's the same thing with every spiritual principle that we apply. Hope, faith, courage. We can think of these as being outside of ourselves or etheric. It's not. It has a physiological basis that is hormonally based. It is working with our neurotransmitters. It is basing itself off the last meal you ate. It is in part the collection of your whole and your hopes and your dreams. Everything that you are is matter. And when we say I matter, you matter, we matter. And it does have that physiological effect. Yes.
I love the conversation of bridging the science with the thought of emotion, because I feel like in this space, we often see them as separate things. Like you see a separate practitioner for your emotional state, you see a separate practitioner for your physical state or physical body system. And it's like, they're really connected. You can't heal what it sounds like one without the other. Like you kind of have to be all on the same page and just have that holistic approach, being like these are interconnected and not separate ideas.
It's true. And the separation that happened way back when science, when I believe it was, oh gosh, and I might be naming the wrong person, but I think it was René Descartes. And this information is coming from Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert, which I highly recommend. If you haven't read, please read it, where she talks about how that divide was made because the way society evolved was that the soul, the spirit belonged to the church. And he came in and he said, look, you can keep the soul, you can keep the spirit, give the body to science. So there was that divide in a sense, because it became something where this is strictly physical, the emotions, the spirit, the soul, whatever is gone. Now it's just science. And maybe so if we're looking at a cadaver, right? But when we're dealing with somebody who is living, who has the possibility to change, to grow, to shift, then we're looking at something much more dynamic, something much that we're looking at life. And life, you can't necessarily reproduce that in a lab. So it's something that we are still in the basis of understanding to make sense of. And that is why it's so important to not make that divide at this point in time. And other practices have chosen to keep it together. If we look at Chinese energetic medicine and we look at emotions within that practice, anger stems from the liver, fear from the kidneys, obsession from our stomach. But again, all of those major emotions have a physiological basis. So, and it's not just within our organs, that one spot, but at least it gives us a little bit of something to work with and ways of helping that person who's in front of us seeking support and knowledge and wisdom and practical application.
I like how you brought in the Chinese medicine principles. I think a lot of the listeners are familiar with that, and that concept helps illustrate this nicely. And speaking of the book, Molecules of Emotion, and that's by Candace Pert, in case anyone's interested, she suggests that the body is the subconscious mind. How does this resonate with your clinical practice and approaches to treatment? What does it mean to you?
It makes sense. And I love it so much because one of the things that I try to do is work with my clients into understanding how they can really trust their body. So I do a workshop called Body Trust, and it's a way of being aware of your posture, how you feel about yourself, about how anybody reacts to external stimuli, whatever it might be. And 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 it's not to create a sense of manipulation, but it is a way of connecting with others. So I teach people on how to be observant of other people as well. So that if they're in a situation where somebody is yelling or shrieking at a really high pitch, how they can connect to that person, bring it down to a state where it's a little bit more connected to the heart, connected to the mind, a less in a state of imbalance and panic or depression, and bring it back to a state where it's a little bit more easy to work with to create a situation that's a little bit more peaceful or harmonious. And of course, that can be done within themselves. It can be done with family members, because when we're working holistically, we can't forget too that we're not isolated beings. We have our networks, we have our friends, we have our family, we have our colleagues, we have anybody that we're passing in the streets, strangers. So it's something that when you have that situational awareness and that internal ability to understand what you're feeling, and it does take work. It is an emotional labor. And it's something that is so important in order to find that complete balance that we do need.
And is this because, Nicole, this work you're referring to, because of the subconscious mind that our body is really embodying, if you will, for lack of a better word, we have to train our conscious mind to be able to understand cues and imbalances that are being really maybe relayed to us at a very quiet or maybe volume. Because I notice, I mean, at least this, the way I interpret that subconscious mind concept is that I'm more sensitive than I like to think that I am. I'm the opposite of the hypochondriac. I got this, I'm resilient, I'm not going to be impacted. And then physically, I may experience something, symptom or what have you, after an emotional experience. And I think, oh gosh, I'm more sensitive than I thought I was. Is that kind of what the book's talking about a bit? Am I understanding that correctly?
It is. So that is definitely a major component of it. And I think we need as a society to go so much deeper than what we're trained to do, because right from an early age, we learn how to relate to other people by looking at our facial expressions. We learn what happy looks like, what sad looks like, fearful, surprised. But all of those facial expressions aren't reliable. So in that sense,
Mm.
what we do need to continue working on is communication. So using our voice, using our ability to say what we feel, because other people cannot feel what we're feeling. Sometimes we think,
Mm.
oh, that person should know. They should know me well enough to know that this is how I feel. And I don't like when they do that. It's got to be clear. That communication has to be really distinct and open and vulnerable. So for yourself, Emmy, it's that being vulnerable to say, hey,
Mm.
you know what? Maybe I don't have this today. Maybe I had it yesterday, whatever.
Sure, every day's different.
Or maybe whatever it is, it's being vulnerable enough to connect to other people. And that will allow the other person to say, wow, I didn't know you felt that way. I had no idea. And they'll say that they care. They'll say, like, hey, maybe we can do this or whatever. If you're talking to the right person, healthy boundaries is important.
Yes.
But when you're there and you're communicating that, you're communicating and expressing your personal need, that will allow for that to create a connection that is physical in your own body, that will
Mm.
allow your neurons to connect in a way that they hadn't or needed to connect. So I think that's so important that we don't forget about how key and essential connection with others and ourselves really, really is.
Nicole, I want to backtrack just to a couple moments ago when you did mention connecting to ourselves and trust.
Yes.
So this really sparked kind of a thought process in myself. So I kind of feel like we're kind of conditioned to not really trust ourselves or trust our own voice or trust our own tuition anymore, or trust our own intuition anymore. And I feel like it's because we're just getting bombarded with data, science, PubMed.
Mm.
And it's like we're in this field, in this industry, like it is a part of our world, but it's almost like it's like so much. And it's like if you can't prove it with the study or if it's not black and white, it's like not valid. And it's like we gotta kind of find like a happy medium where it's like we can tune into ourselves and use data that's in front of us. But I feel like we're just kind of cut off from that, just from the society that we're living in right now.
Very true. And you mentioned a few major components there. Our emotions, as intrinsic as they may feel, are societally constructed. We do not innately feel fear. We learn what fear is, and we learn what that feels like in our body, and then we relate it to the concept fear. So, in terms of what you're talking about, is it's that ability to be able to feel what we're feeling, to make that connection, and to understand it beyond what we've learned, beyond that societal aspect of you can only trust this or whatever. And that is ingrained right from an early age. And in many cases, we are learned to not trust our own bodies. So, for example, what I had mentioned before, in terms of anybody who has experienced immense emotional, physical, mental trauma, there is a tendency to dissociate. With that dissociation, what happens is there's that sort of choosing to protect yourself in a way to not feel feelings that are too intense at the time to feel.
Sure.
And that is an incredible process that is life saving in so many ways. But that tendency to dissociate will disrupt the ability to trust. It'll disrupt the ability to connect. It'll disrupt the ability to love and be authentically one's own self. So it does take time and a lot of work to be able to reconnect. So mindful eating, meditation, slowing down in the day to day to just be real with what you're feeling are key. Those are all key points. Journaling. So taking it back to those, or can seem so simple to do, but they're so effective and they work. And it's if we need the science, it is there. If we want science about meditation and how that affects our brain waves, it's there. There's even devices now that you can wear. I haven't tried it myself. Maybe one day I will, but that you can wear that monitors your brain waves and will remind you when you're in a place of more thinking than you are meditating. So it's fascinating. So it'll bring you back to meditating. I think it's called the Muse, and my boyfriend offered to get it to me as a gift a while back, and I said no, I don't need it. But now maybe it would be useful.
Some days, right? Depends
If
on
you-
the time in the day. Yeah, I
right?
can see
Yeah.
that. Mm.
Yeah.
And I can't go any further, Nicole, without mentioning the gut, because I'm reading between the lines and we're talking really about, I think, trusting the gut and how to listen to the gut. So before we jump into how to tune in, will you speak to us on how the gut microbiome can impact our emotional well-being? And you kind of teased it a little bit earlier, but I'd love to know a little bit more specifics, excuse me, on how the gut microbiome impacts our emotional well-being.
Well, what I often will ask people is what has the greatest will to survive? What has the ultimate, like beyond our own capacity to survive, that can survive almost anywhere under any condition? Bacteria,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's so powerful. So when we have that gut intuition, trust it, use it, because it's there. It's there wanting to survive, and it wants you as the host in a very sort of, what's the word, friendly way. It's not a parasite. You're working together. Commensal, that's the
Mm.
word I wanted. That commensal to survive. So when there's that gut instinct, they're telling you to move or to urging you to say something or whatever it might be, trust it because it's real. And we can also take a look at, this one always makes my clients laugh. I'm like, is it you craving the sugar or is it your bacteria? It's so powerful. So when I do something like the gut zoomer, so people can kind of get the information laid out and say, well, hey, look, here's this imbalance. Here's your diversity could really be supported, or the antibiotic use that you've dealt with in your life has played a role. And here's how we're going to help correct that. So little things like that, just to sort of bring in a better balance.
And also, I'm wondering about the neurotransmitters that come from the gut microbiome. We've talked about that a little bit in prior episodes, but there is so much information coming out in terms of the gut microbiome and the emotional well-being on that biochemical level. What's kind of exciting in that realm for you?
It's thrilling work, in part because our microbiome, our immune system, the neurotransmitters that are produced by the bacteria and also through our food, but within, I don't know the exact cell biology for how neurotransmitters are produced, but the majority of them are produced in the gut. There's more serotonin produced in your gut than your brain. So relying on that, recognizing the importance of our gut health and how we feel is so, so key. And that will allow us to make better choices. So one thing that I also work a lot with my clients is understanding epigenetics. Yes, our genetics play a major role, but when we look at our epigenetics, food availability, how does that play a role? Our privilege, how does that play a role? When we look at components like traumas, when we look at uh, the way our food is transported to us, the way that it's grown, all of those factors, it all affects our microbiome. It affects how we feel. If If we're in a situation that we're deprived of food, how is that going to affect the body? How does it affect our mental state? And it's one of the things that I also try to talk about is equanimity, the spiritual principle of equanimity, which also has a physiological basis within our bodies. And it is that ability to be able to understand any outside situation or internal situation without labeling it as good or bad. So, for example, if we feel pain in a certain area or a hunger pain or whatever it might be, it's that ability to be present to the sensation without necessarily saying, oh, this is what it must be, or being super sensitive and getting caught up in negative thoughts or thinking. So that's a major component to really work with. I think I digressed a little.
No, I think that's all really important. And I'm wondering, how do we tell the difference? How do we understand this may be dysbiosis communicating some kind of craving, or no, I want this chocolate bar. I'm making this decision. It is a reasonable decision and it's not my bacteria talking to me. How do we separate the two?
It doesn't have to be separated because on one hand, we're never going to completely rid ourselves of all the bacteria. Like say, for example,
Right.
candida. We talk about that symbiosis between a fungus and a bacteria that loves sugar, craves it, will make you want to eat more than that chocolate bar or whatever. But
Mm,
it will never be eradicated from the body. And we need it. It can actually help keep some conditions, some issues around inflammation and so forth a little bit more in check. We don't want to eradicate anything. We don't want to necessarily make that divide. But if we really want to be clear, it's about being honest with ourselves. Am I going to eat this because, yes, I want to eat it, but I'm also feeling incredibly emotional about something that happened, whether it's good or bad, and being honest with ourselves. So being able to say, I'm going to eat this or I'm not going to eat this for whatever reason, but having that clear understanding, having that clear distinction. And it's really that's what it comes down to. And we know when we're being honest with ourselves. We can feel that. We can trust that feeling.
yeah,
And what
I hear that makes sense, Nicole, as far as, and I think you're touching on maybe guilt a little bit. And again, we're all going to perceive things in a unique way depending on our unique experiences. But when you mentioned justification earlier in our conversation, if there's any passing of guilt that we're assigning to something, that's a feeling that maybe we need to, maybe there is more mindfulness that we could focus on or we could ask for support on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Nicole, staying on the topic of gut health, if I'm a patient tuning in listening right now and I think that I need to improve upon my gut health, maybe I'm eating a whole food diet, but maybe I'm not doing anything like really specific for gut health. Like, what are some really tangible, practical ways that people can support their gut microbiome for better emotional health?
Fermenting, fermenting in your own home, making use of the the bacteria within your own environment is one simple way. Sprouting, there can also be chewing. I created what I call the 30-day 30 chew protocol, and it's being mindful that every single bite of food that you take in, you're chewing it 30 times. If it's a smoothie, you're chewing that smoothie 30 times. So you're really mixing in the amylase that's secreted in your mouth so that you're really digesting those base sugars for 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 better digestion ultimately. You're breaking it down right from the get-go, and it makes such a difference to chew. And it's such a simple thing, but I've had people kind of get upset because they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're recommending chewing? Like, give me the supplement, give me the pill that's going to fix this."
Mhm.
And it's never that simple. And it's really about slowing down, being able to connect to what you're feeling and enjoying the food that you're eating, enjoying the life that you're living, even if it's not exactly what you want in the moment. It's so important.
So much gratitude is, I think, necessary to just be reminded of throughout this. What about lab results, Nicole? I mean, we talked about gut zoomer, maybe neurotransmitters. I know that's an interest of yours. What kind of lab results or patterns do you tend to see in your client base that may warrant or may suggest, oh, I think I need to work on a mind-body approach for this individual?
There's always going to be an imbalance somewhere.
It's
So
true.
right? There's always going to be something that's in the red. There's going to be a lot in the green sometimes, but there's always going to be something that stands out. And I'll say, well, let's take a look at some of the physical attributes related to that neurotransmitter that's a little bit elevated or highly elevated, whatever it might be, and see how that relates to you. See if those feelings and work with those sensations. And for example, I think it's, well, glutamate, for example, if we look at glutamic acid, if that's out of range and we're looking at symptoms that could be described as anxiety, does that person deal with anxiety? How can we work with that? Because we don't want to get rid of glutamate per se. We need that. It's a very essential neurotransmitter, but we want to bring it back into balance. And a lot of that work, in part, yes, it can be done through some of the thoughts that we are choosing to think, the foods that we're choosing to eat. It's about re-empowering the person to understand that everything that they're doing is a choice. And it takes that sense of being hopeless, and it gives something to work with. And I think it's also important to state that it's not about pointing fingers or blaming and saying, oh, you chose to create this illness or this imbalance. It's not that simple, but it is the ability to be responsible for what we do see here today and to be responsible for what happens in the next however long.
Yeah, that's very profound. Thank you for that. I think that one is going to marinate with me for a while. And I want to go a little bit back to the gut instinct and trusting our gut, because of course we all know what this means. I think most people, they know how to listen to their inner voice, but I think some folks are really disconnected to their bodies. And they may not know what it feels like to have a gut instinct. What does it feel like? Or what tips? First of all, what does it feel like, Nicole? And I'm sure that's unique to everybody, but how do you describe that to clients? And then two, how do we learn how to not only recognize it, but how do we continue to listen to it? I heard it referred to as the pilot light, which I really like. Is there some kind of maybe visualization or some kind of tips or tricks that you use with clients to help them really tune in to that gut instinct?
There's a few. Exercise is going to be the number one way to connect to your body. Yoga, when you're in that posture and you're focused on your breath and you're feeling that burn, it's so good. That's one way to start connecting to what you're feeling, to start connecting to your body. Fasting, if I feel the client is ready to do that, it's a way to kind of get back past some of those louder internal feelings like hunger. And because if you're fasting for a period of time, then you're able to start understanding and hearing the body, hearing the little intricacies and nuances that are present. So fasting is a powerful one to work with. And it can be a shorter fast, but if somebody's able and willing to do longer fasts, do it. It will make all the difference in being able to have that body-mind connection. Journaling. So a person who journals, in part, yes, what they ate, but what happened during the day and how they felt in their body is another way to reconnect. So those are all really powerful ways to process some of the emotional components that are present on a physiological basis.
I love that you brought up fasting, just selfishly, because I'm interested. I've been experimenting with more extended fasts recently. I did a 3-day water fast a couple weekends ago, and it's really wild to think that we really don't go like a day our whole life without eating, maybe every 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. And it's like, even if you have like a good relationship with food, you don't realize how much food can kind of like numb feelings and thoughts. And yeah, it's wild. Definitely a tool that I really love. But I do want to shift gears a little bit and talk about sleep, because the more that time goes on, the more that we're realizing how important sleep is, all the studies that are coming out about late night, like shift workers or overnight workers and longevity and brain health and all these things. So, how does sleep play a role in maintaining hormonal and emotional balance? And like what happens to our neurotransmitters when we're not getting adequate sleep, whether that's quantity or quality?
It is devastating in a sense what happens when sleep is not present or it is deprived, especially over a long period of time. The body can adapt to short stints where sleep is deprived, and especially for women. I mean, if you have a child, your sleep is going to be deprived, and on one level, we're made for that. But on the other hand, if it's something where it's work related stress and it's nonstop and it's circular thinking, or it could be physical pain, whatever might be happening, it's been shown that telomeres will be shortened, and that affects the longevity of your life and the quality of your life. So, on a hormonal basis, it kind of almost throws everything out of whack because there's not one thing that is separate or isolated from any other organ or system in the body. So, the thyroid is impacted, our reproductive health is affected. So, the whole body really will be uh, is really affected by the lack of sleep. Melatonin is such a powerful hormone, neurotransmitter. I think it's a little bit of both or can be in both categories. And it's an antioxidant as well. So when you're sleeping, your body is healing, ideally. And when that healing isn't taking place, when that REM sleep isn't present, it affects how you're able to understand. And what I had spoken about earlier about the predictions that your brain is constantly making, it will slow down that process, making you more liable for accidents, for making poor choices. So the way that balloons in your life is pretty powerful. The one thing I want to say though is the stress that comes with not sleeping and that looping thought of like, oh my gosh, I'm not sleeping again.
Oh
I'm
gosh.
not going to feel good tomorrow. Da, 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 da. If you can, try and cut that out. Accept what it is. Use the power of equanimity in that situation and journal it out. If there's a reason that you're not sleeping, find out what's going on. What's the emotional component? And that might help better understand the emotional imbalance that's at play.
That's a really powerful piece of advice because I think it's really easy to get in our heads, especially when you're laying late or we hear the alarm go off in the morning. It's like, oh my gosh, I only slept 5 hours. I know my brain didn't get time to recover and my lymphatic system is going to be bad. And it's just, we just start, the voice in the head starts going, and then that just makes the experience of it so much more unbearable. So I think that's a really powerful statement that you just said.
So, and it's important too, when that does happen, taking a look, making lighter food choices, making it so that you're not giving as much or needing as much energy for your digestion as you would need normally. Taking time to meditate, even if it's a 5 to 10 minute meditation in the day, in the bathroom of your work, it doesn't matter where, your car, taking that time just to sit and breathe, that's still going to allow your brain to take a few moments to rest, to just work through whatever it is that's there. So there are ways to kind of adapt to that stress that's present if you're willing to do it.
Very helpful and hopeful for those moments in need that I think we can all relate to, and that unraveling is something that can be so uncomfortable. But again, I think that we are more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. So absolutely. So I'd love to hear about a case, Nicole, wherein you address the mind to help heal the gut. Because of course, it's not going to be all mind work. But is there a favorite case of yours that comes to mind?
When I was thinking about this, and I feel every person I see. So do I have a specific case in mind? Oh, there's so many. And when I have somebody who comes to see me who is willing to put in the work, that's where I see the greatest results. So I've had clients who have had bouts of alternating diarrhea, constipation, kind of like the typical IBS scenario.
Mhm.
And I'll say, okay, We're going to bring in some omega-3s. We're going to bring in a good probiotic with human microflora. We're going to focus on working on your chewing. We're going to bring in some meditative components, and that person shines. They do the work and they see the results, and it's fantastic. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. Other times it takes longer. It takes time for that person to get into that place of being willing to work on themselves. And we live in a society that is always looking for that instant gratification, the instant answer. So what's the quick fix? What is going to get me back on my feet, feeling good, having the energy I want, looking the way I want? That it's not that easy. And that's where I talk a lot about acceptance. And in my blog, I have a lot of where I bring in spiritual principles and how it affects the person physiologically. Acne is a big one. I have a lot of young ladies coming to see me about acne, and I always open it up. I'm like, you have to start with acceptance. If you want to see results, you have to accept where you are now. Because when you're coming here with a place of disgust and self-hatred and shame and fear and despair, those are the components that are going to get in your way of seeing the results that you want to see. It's about accepting who you are, as beautiful as you are, with all your many flaws, and recognizing nobody is perfect. And it's that ability to say, hey, I accept and love myself for who I am today. And then, hey, well, you know what? I accept and love myself. I'm going to make better food choices. I'm going to drink the water. I'm going to do the meditation. I'm going to show up to my exercise class. I'm going to do this. It shifts.
The snowball effect.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's like the positive momentum when you have that positive intentions, like you're doing it out of self-love and for yourself, and not just checking a box because the doctor said so or the nutritionist said so, etc. Kind of calling myself out here, but what about those patients? This used to be me. They come in, they take the supplements, they change the diet, they do the workout, but they can't get the mental piece. Like, do you see that kind of this hold up in their healing process if they're unable to do like the meditation or the mindset work?
For sure. And I mean, as you bring in some of the other components, I do try to say, recognize what you're doing. Give yourself grace for what you are doing. The rest will come. The patience that you're looking for will come. And it doesn't have to always be a complete stillness meditation. Start with simple things, walking. I mean, if you really want to get intensive about meditation, go to Vipassana. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a 10-day silent retreat, up to 10 hours of full on still. It's intense, but once you're there, you do it, and that's it. You make the choice to do it. So that is intense, and I recommend a lot of clients. I think one of the biggest holdups sometimes can be shame. So when shame comes into the picture, I say focus on self-healing and mindful emotions rather than self-hatred and mixed up emotions. Bring in that acceptance, bring in that power to love yourself. And I mean, it's not really scientific or whatever, but it's stuff that I love, like the work of Emoto with the water and the crystals. I don't know. Little things like that. If you're giving positive messages to yourself, we have that ability to affect ourselves by our thoughts. And it's not the whole story, but it's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's like every cell in the human body is it's constantly listening to what you're thinking and what you're telling it. So I love that. That made me think of, and this might have been what you were referring to also, is the studies that they've done with setting an intention on like a glass of water and then freezing the water and seeing the difference between like, even I've seen it done with different types of music too, like a healing frequency versus like a really crazy piece of music and vice versa with thoughts. So it's quite interesting. That was the one thing that kind of cracked my mind open, like, wait, we're made of water. And look what the water's doing. Like there's some kind of connection there, but
for sure. And sometimes we need that discordance. I'm a huge Tool fan, and it's like just getting into that rock out type of momentum. Like jump around kind of thing and feel that emotional content within the music. It's beautiful. It's really wonderful.
That paradox is there. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's so cool that you bring that up, Nicole, because it depends. Again, going back to this dynamic nature of all of this, it depends on the day. Because you're talking about rock music, and it depends on my mood and the day and what I need, and it can be super energizing, or it can be way too overwhelming, and
Exactly.
Sometimes we need a little bit of fire,
exactly, yes,
a breath of fire or to jump around. Sometimes we need like a box breathing, like slow down.
yes, and knowing what we need, being able to tap into that, I think is really the name of the game here. And we're wrapping it up soon, and I think you have one last question, or maybe not, Melissa, but I wanted to ask Nicole, how do you take care of yourself in all of this? I mean, this is, oh my gosh, this is passion work that you're doing. I mean, teaching self-love. Do you bring in mentors? Do you bring in referrals? Are you referring out to psychologists, counselors? And how do you take care of yourself? That's a two-part question, but I have to know, please.
Good question. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the abuse and the addiction, I go to a 12-step program. I make space for that in my life. I keep it a priority, because if I don't keep that a priority, I lose everything else. So 12-step programs are fabulous. They're free. They're peer support. There's NA, SIA, AA, CA, MA, whatever. It's all anonymous. You'll find it, whatever you need. Al-Anon, Coda, whatever. So that's one really powerful way. For myself, I made the space to go to hot yoga, and I go twice a week, every week. If I can go more, I go. I love it. So finding ways, activities that I love. I love the outdoors. I moved to a space where my neighbor has chickens and there's wildlife in the area. So the commute is a little bit longer, but it's worth it on that level. And water. I make sure I'm drinking water. That is one thing I can't stress enough with my clients. Most people are not drinking enough water. So there's one thing, if you want to flush out your emotions, you got to have the water to do it. So otherwise, it's just going to recirculate. Those neurotransmitters that are involved, they can get stuck. It can build up. What are those excesses? How do we get them out? Drink your water. Flush it out. It's so important. But yeah, it's an ongoing thing of learning how I can be at my best so that I can be present and there to support others in that process.
I love that. You have to fill your cup up first, so that way you can serve everyone else around you in a better capacity. Nicole, this episode has been filled with so many amazing things. I feel like I have so many little mental notes and things I need to look into, and we'll definitely put the books you mentioned down in the show notes. But before we close, I do like to end every episode on a really positive note and ask every guest, what does it mean to you to live a vibrant life?
Oh, it means feeling joy. It means truly being honest with oneself. So, test results don't lie, right? So being truly honest and just accepting life and recognizing what a gift, what a miracle it is to be alive. And every emotion is a biochemical miracle, a biochemical miracle for what we're feeling. So embrace it, love it.
I love that. This life is a gift.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for taking the time to come on the podcast today. I loved this episode. I can't wait for our audience to be able to tune in and listen to everything that we touched on today. Hopefully, we sparked some inspiration. And to anyone listening that wants to get in contact with you, maybe consume some of your content, or maybe even be a patient of yours down the line, where can our listeners find you?
So I have my website, lifestylenaturopathy.com. I can be reached at Nicole at lifestylenaturopathy.com. I have my blog. So for those, I serve primarily one-on-one clients in Quebec. But if you're not in Quebec, please make use of my blog. I'm always writing, and I think that's a great resource. And I will be doing webinars that will be available for download that people can work with and benefit from. And
Amazing.
I have products. Anybody can buy that. I have simplicity, integrity, and unity, as well as empathy. So
Supplements or?
They are skincare products that they're really basic, super clean. Beauté for the hair is the cleanest product you'll find on the market, and it just augments the natural beauty of your hair. So it's a really good one to work with, and anybody can benefit from that. It's like spirituality in a bottle, but why not, right?
Who doesn't want that? I love it.
Yes.
Amazing. We'll be sure to, I'm definitely going to check that out, but I'll make sure we link this down in the show notes so everyone can find you, connect with you, and look into some of your products as well. Again, thanks, Nicole, for taking the time to chat with us today, and for everyone tuning in. Thanks for listening. And until next time, wishing you all vibrant health and wellness.
Thank you so much for your hospitality and beautiful hosting abilities. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you so much for being here today. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe so we can continue to pay it forward together. And remember, the key to longevity is knowledge. Keep learning, growing, and tuning in to the Vibrant Wellness Podcast to discover the latest insights and strategies for optimal health. Join us again next week. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The views expressed by guest and host are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy of Vibrant Wellness. As always, consult your healthcare provider before applying any recommendations that you heard here today.